interest groups. Sorry about that. I always start before the recording. And thank you for joining us today, PPKM, our interest group, and we'll be discussing business process architecture. Our speakers for today are Catherine McDonough and Mo Ajaz. Did I say that correctly, Mo?
Perfectly.
Oh, well, great. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Thanks to those of you who've come back for another installation in our series. And welcome to people who are just joining us for the first time. I'm delighted today to be joined by my friend and teammate, Mo, and we're going to be talking about business process architecture. And lucky you, because you're going to be hearing some of Mo's war stories from when he was at National Grid. So we're going to be covering kind of at a high level, what is business process architecture, the idea of do you focus on design? Do you focus on build? If you build it, will they come? Where to start in terms of understanding your organizational readiness for business process architecture, the change management components that we need to consider and keep in mind, how we might select or really select and prioritize our projects. Most of us already have a backlog, but if we kind of build something that allows for employees to engage and share where they see opportunities for improvement, then we're not only creating a forum for pent-up grievances, we're really tapping into the employee experience and engaging people in a way that results in all kinds of better ideas for us. We're also going to dive into how to make better decisions using data. It's a little like, data everywhere, but what the heck to use? What kinds of data? How do we use those key performance indicators that everybody's so crazy about? How to use things like baseline assessments and do better alignment work. And we're going to spend the bulk of our time learning from Mo's time at National Grid, his case study, and a methodology that he strongly prefers. And I think you'll find it incredibly useful, the 3C methodology. So let's start right away with what is business process architecture. And it's this idea for us that if we could design and build something that is visual and hierarchical, where it allows us to see all the processes that an organization uses and how they interact with one another. Do they touch each other? Do they intersect? Do they parallel each other? It really gives us this blueprint from which we can make better business decisions and allows us to align what we are doing both strategically and tactically with the direction in which we want to go. It's not really included in the definition, but for me too, the business process architecture, when we're doing this work well, we are building a culture of continuous improvement, because that's what gets us that relevancy. That's what allows things to make good business sense versus something that's just done for the sake of some kind of academic exercise. I think some of you have seen this graphic from Andre Green's previous presentations to this wonderful SEG. And the whole idea of a robust process architecture is that it allows us to tap into the expertise of all the players in our ecosystem so that we are getting to this end-to-end type thinking. And we're connecting from business strategy all the way to where we live in our SIG, in implementation and operation. That means the design piece and the build piece has to serve as the bridge between where we start with strategy and where we end up with operations. But love this graphic, and we've included the link here in case you want to grab it, unless you're already taking screenshots. But graphically, I could explain this for 20 minutes, but I could say it much more quickly by showing you the graphic and what is included in each one of these things. Our processes are, to our way of thinking, a lot like an old farmhouse that you would come across as you're driving through the countryside in whatever place you happen to live or visit. And you could see that very often, like a farmhouse, we might have started with something and then added a building to it, and then added another added an extension to the building as our needs change. Maybe we got a little more money or additional resources, so then we tacked on another thing, and whoops, there goes a silo that gets erected, and whether it's intentional or not, and pretty soon you have a patchwork of buildings or patchwork of processes that look just like a farmhouse. You never would have designed it this way if you were creating it from the ground up. So very often this is a situation in which we find ourselves, especially if you're new to an organization. You come in and you see, well, this is a patchwork. Some of the people who were instrumental in contributing to the patchwork are still around. What do I do now? How do I organize what we're doing in a way that doesn't offend those people, but rather brings people along in whatever is this new, improved kind of design that we want to build within our law department. It's a very different thing to design something than to build it. But it's awfully hard to build something that is sustainable, that is thoughtful, that connects all of those things, that creates that bridge without a really good design. And for a good design, you need architects. And so that's why we're talking about business process architecture today. All of the things that we do in our work is connected to what we call the P+ ecosystem at the Legal Lean Sigma Institute. And while we typically abhor consultant speak and kind of kitschy sounding things, we did need to come up with this framework for how we think about the connectedness of things. Because once you start building a business process architecture, by definition, we can't just focus on the things that our SIG here is really zeroed in on: process improvement, project management, and knowledge management. By definition, once you start tinkering with those things, it necessarily affects these and a whole lot of other P's in the ecosystem. So when we're designing, we're being thoughtful about all of these other areas plus additional P's that might not be on here, positioning, for example, so that we're not, inadvertently designing something where, you've got to pass through a bathroom to get from bedroom to kitchen. We want to be really thoughtful about how the users are going to be taking this blueprint and using it to do other work besides the building of the architecture itself. It's got to be useful. So those of you who have joined us in previous programs have seen this P+ scorecard that we use to assess organizational readiness. And it's a good thing to start with in terms of where you think your organization falls in each of the P's that are in the ecosystem. And so we've got the scorecard here for you. One of the things we love to do is to ask different people in your department to take the scorecard, and we have some backup information about what we mean by each of these areas, and ask people, where do you think we fall using this scorecard in each of the categories? And then come back together and see how closely aligned you are. Everybody is going to have their own experience, their own perspective, but right away we can use this not only for assessments, but to begin getting people who will be part of the architecture team and the build team quite literally on the same page. And yes, in case there are any questions about this, you can give yourself a 1.5 or a 2.75. This is kind of like a sliding scale. You're not limited to the boxes. So we will be distributing not all of these slides that we're presenting today, but for certain we will share with you the P+ scorecard, along with the questions and the things that we might inquire about in each of these P+ areas: process improvement, project management, pricing and profitability, people. We always say it's people, process, platform in that particular order. So we want to be very thoughtful about that. Performance management, how aligned are we in how we evaluate and manage performance with our stated objectives, especially when it comes to things like efficiency. Do we reward people for those things? Performance metrics, practice management and innovation. Are we moving toward not only a continuous improvement culture, but are we moving along the continuum from opportunistic to systematic to, dare I suggest, automatic in some areas? I don't think any of us will be fully automatic in my lifetime, but many organizations have made great strides to getting more toward that automatic continuous improvement culture. But at least instead of just saying, okay, our fire's burning brightly, let's go tackle those things, to being more of what we're talking about in terms of building business process architecture to be more systematic, more data, making more data-based decisions. Thinking through the various considerations. Not only why is this important, but more specifically, why is this important for us at this time? What do we need to put into our architecture design? What are some of the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves? Who's going to be responsible for this? Do we need to take, for whatever reason, culturally or otherwise, a top-down approach or a grassroots bottom-up approach in how we build this architecture? Who's going to take on what roles? Very often we see, for example, a new general counsel or a CLO appear on the scene, and they say, we would like to make continuous improvement a cornerstone, a pillar, if you will, of our approach to doing our work together. They might want us to take more of a top-down approach in terms of how we design. How do we convince those that need to be brought along of the importance of building such a thing, spending any time on the design? A lot of times we'll be receiving a lot of pressure. Just go do something, get something done. we don't have time to build all of these things. Or can't you build it as you are delivering stuff? And to that we say, it's awfully hard to fix the engine of your car while you are also driving down the highway. One must pull the car over, see what it is that needs to be fixed. I mean, yes, we know the check engine light is on, but we don't always know why, or how long it will take to fix. And so, making the time to do these things, and convincing others of the importance of this, I know I'm probably preaching to the choir there. Thinking about alignment, and I think Mo will really speak to this, about what he did at National Grid aligned with needs and values and critical success factors, tying those things into things that mattered, back into thinking about that whole P+ ecosystem. What are the metrics that we all agree to focus on, report on, keep an eye on, and make sure that we're paying attention to more of those leading indicators versus lagging indicators. A big aspect of doing business process architecture, design, and build is to give us those warning signals, the peek around the corner that we've got an issue coming, so that we can attack those things in the moment and fix the way it's done, plus the thing being done, so that we're not, I always get the image of Lucy and Ethel in the chocolate factory. We're trying to clean up the messes as we go. And it's awfully hard to focus more proactively on the things that need to get done if we're constantly fighting fires, right? So thinking about, we've got internal customers in the law department, external customers in our business units, and of course, the outside customer, or client of the organization. We've got to weigh all of these things. This is a tool that Mo and I both use quite a bit, stakeholder mapping. And Mo, isn't this one of the first tools that you like to use when you're doing the design work?
Absolutely. You need to know who you need to influence, and you need to know who's going to have a positive or negative impact on your project. So understanding that up front, you can then understand the whole piece about what's in it for each of those individuals. So it's a very good tool.
Yeah, I think most of you have done some kind of stakeholder analysis work before, but I think it's kind of what we're saying, start with the people. The people will make or break whatever, no matter how good the thing is that you're designing. If you don't have the people on board, and if you haven't thought about where to get stakeholders on board, aligned, supported, or at least built in some countermeasures for some of that, where we're going to get some of the pushback. It doesn't matter how good our design is, it could get derailed. And I think we've all had that experience, unfortunately. But as we were saying earlier, experience is a wise teacher. So you live and you learn. One of the first things that we recommend doing is to come up with a way to surface, select, prioritize, and resource process improvement projects. If your architecture does not have that built into it, there's little transparency, little you can do in terms of communicating and educating people. It will appear that the work that you're doing is haphazard, even if it isn't. And so it's always something that we recommend you consider putting in place.
Whenever I've done this, Catherine, as a consultant or as an in-house person, the story starts with you get engaged by the general counsel. The general counsel has got their own axe to grind, or their drivers, so they'll give you their improvement ideas. Their team themselves have got a load of ideas that the general counsel hasn't. If they're new, maybe they're not shared them with the general counsel. They're not important enough for the general counsel to understand them at this stage. And then the key stakeholders will. So the task always is, what 3 things are working well with the legal department, what 3 things could be done better. Having done your stakeholder map, you go and ask those questions. You ask the general counsel the same questions, and you ask the team, the legal team, all those the same. And then we would use an effort impact matrix to identify and pull to the surface the real problems that exist. And then when people see their words on your project plan or on your project list, everyone's bought into it because it's done, through a democracy, as opposed to the general counsel saying, I want revenue improvements, I want efficiency improvements, and people haven't got the tools, or haven't got the technology to do the job. So I think Catherine's first point is really important. Before you start any program, trying to identify all of the opportunities that could be tackled, and then use some kind of voting to get the most important ones, and then take them forward.
Agree. There's so many ways to measure what's going on. If you really don't have an organization with a massive appetite for using data, even just doing something simple in terms of a baseline assessment, and by that we mean understanding process capability. How well is it delivering what the users require, what the end client requires of the process, and what's it cost to operate? What are the resources required to operate that process? Even if you only come up with 2 of those things, and it's okay if you say, I've made the following assumptions, I've extrapolated. It's okay to do that, but showing that you've done a little bit of research and you understand where your starting point is not only important for kind of getting buy-in at the front end. Of course, it makes sense at the end of a project. That's the only way you're going to be able to show your impact, your before and after. So baselines are incredibly useful tools, and they're pretty easy to put together. Again, it can be something pretty robust, but back of the napkin type calculation based on readily available data is pretty good. There are really just some purely practical considerations. You might be advised as a law department that you need to get ready for X, Y, and or Z project. So there you're kind of in receive mode and you need to respond to that. But there's also, a lot of benefit to being proactive about things. We're expected in legal operations to be able to take a peek around that corner and develop the capacity to handle other things that you could reasonably foresee the law department is going to be required to be able to handle. So really good starting points for this. And we want to share some additional tools. We love this 3C methodology of concern, cause, and countermeasure.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk through it, Catherine?
Please.
Sure. So any program that you start with, especially to bring the business along with you or the team along with you, one of the tools that I use over and over again is to work with my stakeholders to identify the kind of key concerns that they have with what I'm trying to do. So I've got a couple of examples that I'll talk through in a bit more detail, but the first example is around changing the supply chain. So we had at one point 60 law firms, and we needed to bring it down to 21, and then we had to bring it down to 12 law firms. So the audience or the stakeholders would have concerns that I was going to come in and mess up the law firms that were in the stable, making sure that that I do a job that's going to give them what they want. So my job was to spend some time with them, identifying all of their concerns. Lawyers are great at giving you concerns. Lawyers are great at telling you how the project's going to fail, and that is really kind of great because it allows you to then move on to the next stage, which is, what's the cause of that concern? So one of the concerns is you're going to get rid of my law firm. And I've worked with this law firm for a long time, and they've got lots of historic knowledge of our organization. What's the cause of that concern? The cause of that concern is that I don't know that this law firm's got a lot of knowledge. The other concern is that I'm going to run a under the veil process, and I'm going to choose the firms that I want. A number of other causes may exist as to why that concern exists. And then my job is to assure this individual that, if I do the following, will you come with me? So that's where the countermeasure point comes in. So the solution for the individual who says, I'm going to potentially lose my law firm, is to say, look, this is a procurement process. I can't skew it one way to get your firm in, but I will put you on the panel to make sure that you're there and the whole visibility is there, and I'm sharing data with you along the way. If these guys don't respect us or don't value us as a client, and they don't give us the information of the spend data or the costings, etc., or value adds, then they don't deserve to be on our panel. But if the countermeasure is you're going to be on the project, you're going to see everything that's going to happen, you're going to mark with me. If that is put in place, will you support the end panel? And then generally the audience will, the person will say, yes, I will support that because that's a fair process and I'm involved in it. So using, the concern causing countermeasure as a tool to identify and surface the concerns of the stakeholders, putting together a list of the countermeasures gives you, a roadmap of all the things that you must do to satisfy the delivery of the project. So that this tool is really good, and I might reference it again as we talk through the examples. And here's a worked example which we can share with you.
So this is a good reference, and we'll also include this with the
how to use
notes for you, so that you have it to refer to. One of the reasons I love this so much is it's basically giving you the keys to the kingdom, and you're starting out right away with understanding where you have potential points of resistance, and so you can more easily overcome those things. You can incorporate this into your design, and that way when you present the design, you're reflecting back, I heard you, I see you, I hear you, and I'm responding to you. I'm addressing those concerns that you raised, and you get automatic buy-in.
You do, and by doing this in a transparent way and putting it on the wall as a visual management hub, you've got your reference point. So 001, the date the concern was raised, what was the concern, what was the cause, what was the countermeasure, who's going to do what they're going to do with it, and then in terms of how is it going to be eliminated, and quick items can be resolved straight away, but there might be some things that need further work, and then at the bottom is the tool that we use to kind of show the concerns being identified, the root cause has been resolved, countermeasures has been done, and then we've actually eliminated the problem. So this is a good tool. It comes from the creative problem solving methodology, and we use it all the time.
It's also a really good way of sorting out who has a preferred way of doing things, and where we have more flexibility or receptivity to maybe doing things a different way. Because when you do your business process architecture, you will, it's sort of obvious. I don't mean to say something that's like, duh, but you're going to see people doing the same things in different ways. And so before you kind of impose the way, it really helps you avoid the mistake of organizing somebody else's workbench for them, which is going to be met with, at best, massive passive resistance. It also puts you in a better decision-making position in terms of reconciling competing technology. This happens all the time when we're looking at the architecture. you see two different silos using different technology to do similar or even the same type of work. So as you're coming up with all this mapping and making all these fascinating discoveries, you'll feel a little bit like treasure hunters. You're going to find all sorts of surprises. Some will be welcome and fascinating, and just you'll say, wow, this is great that we have this available to us. And some will just have you shaking your head saying, oh my goodness, I can't believe we are spending this amount of money to have two different systems. We're supporting these two different things. No wonder these people in the same law department or same organization or different units in the same parent organization, we've got apples and oranges. Even though we say we're doing the same things, we're in two totally different places. So this allows for those kinds of conversations, so you can get at the different people, and everybody is persistently dialed into WIIFM, what's in it for me, the process components and the platform components. So we're getting to all of those P's as well as the other P's in the ecosystem. And like any good architect, we're really thinking about designing space. And I'm not ashamed to admit I have a love of watching HGTV. Andre and I had a little conversation in preparation for today's content about the show Love It or List It, where a designer comes into an existing space and they say to her, these are our must-haves for staying in this space. Let's see if you can design something here that will make me stay. Whereas the realtor says, what will it take for you to move? Well, here's what I need in order to go to this entirely new place. So typically it involves a couple where one wants to stay and one wants to go. And so we've got to, appease both parties. And this is our role as designers, is to take the space that we've got to work with, but see how to make the space work for the people who are using it. Or what do we do to convince people to move to an entirely new structure that will serve them better based on their stated needs and wants? And that's what we're trying to get at. It's basically eliciting the user requirements. So it's such an important step. If you do this right, the design piece becomes a whole lot easier.
Cool. So guys, I'm going to talk you through three examples, two from National Grid and one from a current assignment that I'm on. And the National Grid is a big FTSE 100 company in the UK and is listed in the US as well. And what we do is with the biggest electricity transmission network in the UK and do quite a lot of infrastructure to Europe, similarly in the US. But I want to tell you the story of how I got involved in this process architecture piece of work for the legal department. So I was a lawyer, long-standing lawyer, then a general counsel for 10 years for National Grid. And then after having done an MBA and an MSc in Lean, I decided that actually I wanted to do some of this improvement work. And then an opening came of the global head of legal operations. And my boss kind of said, I don't really want a lawyer doing it. I want an accountant or someone outside of the law doing it. But because of your interest and this, we'll put you on for a trial. I was quite lucky at the time that we had a new CEO, and the CEO appointed his blue-eyed boy who decided that he was going to go to every department and find efficiencies. He did a benchmarking exercise across all of our teams and identified the legal department was 64% against benchmark in terms of efficiency. The benchmarking organizations that he used were wrong. And we had to convince this blue-eyed boy that actually what we should be doing is doing process and kind of design design improvement as opposed to kind of wholesale getting rid of people. So that was the background of the story. And then walking into that actually gave me quite a lot of, I don't know, power and also support from the wider legal team, because I was defending roles and versus kind of doing an improvement piece. So that's the background. And I'm just going to show you on the next slide some of the projects that we did, and we won a fair few awards for this. So, you know, I talked about the efficiency agenda. Finally, I got the guy to agree to a 25% efficiency piece. We spent quite a lot of time getting the right benchmarks, using our network, using some of the you know, the brands out there to kind of get comparable benchmarks, and then kind of came up with a list of things that we could do to kind of deliver the 25% efficiency. Some of those things are on the list here. One of the big things that we did was that we had a global panel, and the panel wasn't working for us, and we were getting screwed by some of the law firms. So getting the right panel in place to make that happen. The two items at the bottom, transfer of properties and the employee engagement score, they again supported the kind of the retaining our talent and also demonstrating actually if we do things differently, we can use process and project management to deliver results. And so my other example is on transferring of the 18,000 properties. So kind of I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I think we should just talk through the example. So this is sort of a visual, a plan on the page of what I did to get our supply chain in the same place, in the right place, to demonstrate the value. So, you know, imagine a series of law firms that had no relationship management. The law firms were frustrated because they were sending bills in, they weren't getting paid. The internal team were not sufficiently talented, had experience to kind of project manage the law firm. So scoping wasn't great. We had some real issues with when bills were coming in, people didn't understand who had instructed them. We had no e-billing system. We had very little data that we could sort of demonstrate trends on spend. So the first piece of work that we did was, before we even started the panel exercise off, we spent some time looking at our vision, mission, objective, strategy, and tactics. So that's what VMO stands for. So what is it that the legal department has been asked to do for our panel? So there, the vision was to have a smaller panel, to have better relationships, to have better data, to get value adds from the law firms, to get them to be doing work in a more consistent way, for them to be using technology, for them to be using process people, for them to be using the value pyramid and not just getting all the work done at partner level. So identifying the vision and the mission allowed me to put the strategy and the tactics in detail. So the tactics are the bits that I'm going to talk you through now, because there's another slide where I talk through how we got to the panel. So the big message here is identifying what's the vision and mission for the task in hand, and how that aligns to the greater vision and mission of the blue-eyed boy was kind of what I had to get right in that first stage. The next stage, once we've got a sorry, actually let me talk through that slide. Actually, that might be a better way of doing it. So this is how I put the panel together. So the first example there is being very clear with the stakeholders. What is the time frame of what's going to get done by when? My stakeholders needed to know that I was going to do the socialization piece properly, do the 3 C's properly, get the external benchmarks properly, give enough time for people to submit the RFPs, mark the RFPs, all that kind of stuff. So one of the big things that got me clarity for what I had to deliver and by when was that first slide, which is essentially the time frame and all of the various stages that needed to happen. Another thing that I kind of knew that I had to do was I had to end up with 12 law firms. So the hopper there at the top is the dates of all of the key activities and how many law firms were left in the process. And again, that's quite a great visual for kind of keeping a track of, am I conforming to my project plan? And my stakeholders very clear about what's going on. The next item is my 3C. So having done the 3C, I asked using a series of workshops with the individuals. What are the concerns and countermeasures, and the items there are the things that they said I had to get right in order for the project to kind of be successful. Item 4 is the RFP. Item 5 is making sure that the right people were in on the table and involved in getting the RFP to the place that it needed to be. So that's all my stakeholder mapping and the stakeholders helping me put together the program. The next one is the scoring sheets, how we selected the firms that we wanted, some, a core bit on the pricing. When we got to a place where we knew which firms were going to help us with what, that was the point where we needed to get all of those law firms familiar with what our vision, mission, and objectives were. And so the house of quality, which is item 13, is essentially the legal department's vision and the key pillars that it wanted to deliver. You don't just put a panel together and it be successful. You've got to create conditions for collaboration. You've got to create conditions for improvement. So we split the tasks that we wanted the teams to kind of work on, which is item number 12. So we wanted some of our law firms to work on technology, some of our law firms to work on value adds, pricing, some stuff on golden rules, some stuff. So we had 6 projects and we allocated them to the law firms. So what I wanted to just pull out on this slide for you guys is that having a project like a supply chain review requires you to think about the whole process from an end-to-end perspective, and also identify what are the key goals or architectural features of that project, and then putting together a kind of a project plan that can then be demonstrated and measured against is kind of important. You will see from the pictures, calling the law firms in, having the collaboration sessions with them, making sure that the firms are set up for success was why this project was successful. And we won a number of awards on the back of the work that we did here. To go back to the previous slide, Catherine, this is essentially what I shared with my law firms. So I basically said to them, look, we've got this joint program of improvement pieces that we've got to do together. I was very clear about the rules of engagement. Now, you're on our panel because we expect you to perform in this way, and here's the golden rules, and this is how we're gonna measure you. One of the big things that I did was put a law firm scorecard together, and that had things like throughput, budgets, who was doing what work, and the scorecard did also benchmarking across the panel firms. So I have 12 firms, and some of the, all of the law firms were giving me value adds, but the throughput that they were getting was, some firms were getting 10 million, and they were giving me, 100K of value adds. Other firms were only getting 5 million, and they were still giving me, 100K of value adds. And the ability to divide one sum by the other gives you a percentage. That percentage allows you to rank the law firms in order. So when you have these relationship meetings, you end up having data that you can use to kind of take things forward. So putting the CRM meetings in place, making sure that where they are giving us value adds, that they get credited for it. The relationship is based on facts. The scorecard enabled me to kind of say this was working, that wasn't working. And then it isn't a done deal once you've got a panel in place. Every year you have new objectives. Every year you have improvement programs. The law firms don't like how you work. We don't like how they work. How do you surface those issues, like we said earlier on, to a 3C or whatever, and create the regular operational excellence programs and make sure that we continue to mobilize and then improve our vision, mission, objectives again. So this is just a quick example of how do you take business process architecture and understand all of the key features to make it deliver. Catherine, any questions that you've got on this one?
The only thing that I would just call out is how you've built in the continuous improvement component to the architecture. Yeah. And I think that's, that's vital, because if you want to have a sustainable design that gets built, you have to, reassess and evaluate and adjust and iterate, because just because you designed it and built it based on the initial set of inputs does not mean it's going to continue to work year over year. You're going to learn as you go. And so, the best way to continue to have a sustainable model is to redesign, is to iterate, to be a learning organization, incorporate, the lessons that you learn from experience. And I realize that sounds like doing a whole lot of work all over again. I would encourage you to view it as an opportunity to engage all of those stakeholders on a regular basis. And in those engagements, don't just serve as order taker. Use that as opportunities to talk about your success stories, not necessarily for the purposes of just tooting your own horn, but to educate people. Storytelling is grossly used as a way of connecting people across an organization and giving people ideas about using that space and designing things. I mean, to go back to the love it or list it example, the people living in a home, if they had had an idea about how to utilize the existing space in a way that a designer would have, they would have built it a long time ago. So going back and asking people things like, how's that working for you? And getting people to say out loud, you know what, I am so much happier. That works a lot better for me. What I'm realizing, if only this thing also had these two other components, it would be perfect. Why not continue to learn and engage? So it's the continuous aspect that gets into the architecture piece. And if you leave your architecture open enough to add elements, then I think you're working with something that will last for a long time.
So my next example, and actually here's the visuals of, when I said there were 6 projects, here's the 6 projects. So development plans and know-how was one of them, relationship management and new technology. So these are the law firms that were helping us deliver that. I had a visual management hub to make sure that it actually happened. And there was a whole load of checklists and who was doing what. And the project plan was kind of very clear. It was very visual. It was on my wall. And if you look at the top of that image with the rainbow colors on, you can see the house, the pillars. And I wanted to prove that actually this project down the yellow line ticked the following bits of our vision, mission objectives. So this is just an example of some of the tools that I use. Next slide, Catherine.
Mo, just a quick question. Did you share that the color coded? Well, yeah. I think this is vital. In particular,
the law firms that it says who the owners were and internal and external owners, and there was one thing that we were all doing a regular hub conversation around. Where are you at, and what's getting delivered, and what's the bottlenecks, and what can we unlock for you as a team.
I love things like that because, I had to laugh. The road graphic. I love the traveling down the road together. I'm also mindful of the fact that you're in the UK and on the US East Coast, and we drive on different sides of the road, my friend.
But if we get our rules right, we'll knock into each other. So the next example, I might skip over that in the interest of time. There is a better example on one of the current projects that I'm doing, and I think that might be useful for everybody in attendance. So I'm currently working. The next slide, if that's all right, Catherine. I think it starts with So I'm working for an organisation called Kantar, and this is Chatham House rules, so everything stays confidential for the attendees. But the story here is that this organisation historically didn't have a legal department, and all of their contracting work was done by their finance community. We, as a team, were then sort of established, as a legal team were established, and as contract lawyers started to appear, there was this conversation between commercial team and finance business partners around who should own contracting. So this big program was initiated, and I was brought in to help review the whole project and deliver this. So my project is to take repeatable legal work from the finance business partners, move it to legal, but not legal in the UK, but set up a separate team in Porto and Portugal, and recruit those individuals and make those individuals kind of accountable for the delivery of this contracting piece. And that image on the right hand side, that's a picture of my garden, and that's our end-to-end contract management visual process map with all the swim lanes and all the key accountabilities and what finance should do and what legal should do. So that is our level 1 and level 3 process map, and it tells you, you need like, that's 3 meters long, that's 3 meters wide at least, in terms of the process map. So if I jump onto the example, tell you the story of what we did and how we got there and how all of the elements of what Catherine's been talking about. So you need to think about what's the vision for this thing. How does it align to the greater good that we're trying to do? How do we bring the stakeholders in? What is the process element? What's the project management element? What's the change management element? And how do we visually show that? So the need for this was established in January in order for us to actually build something that's going to last. There wasn't one version of truth. So the first piece of work that I did was a task appraisal. So I went out and asked lots of different people, what is it that's working? What is it that's not working? A very similar exercise with 3C. The back of that, we built a rich picture, because I think visually, when you show something, actually, it really knocks people for 6 in terms of this is where we were and this is where we need to get to. Okay. What should I do? Pause the questions? Is that?
Yeah, can we stop just for a second? I do want to make sure that if there are any questions, there's been a robust conversation to certainly give people an opportunity to, but I want to kick off with a question myself. Can you go back to the picture of your level, I believe it was a level 3 process map?
Yeah.
The next slide.
Yeah.
Wrong direction. No, that one. Yeah, unfortunately on my screen, I can't actually see it, and that's okay. But I just know the idea. We did an example of that ourselves, where we just stopped for a moment. We had new management come in. How does the organization work? And it was really critical for us to actually be able to describe to him how, all the processes are. So we had to do just a pure baselining assessment, which was people on a team, just actually reaching out to all of the groups, give us a description of what you do, any procedures, any documentation you have. I think, but the fun part was that even though you can't see it, it was sort of an interconnection, end-to-end process flow, and a technology that supports it, which really tells you where we are today. I do think one of the things that is just a nice takeaway from a conversation like this, for the bigger organizations, even the smaller ones, I know for us, we have solved so many problems, right? We have a new function that we need, let's solve that. Oh, here's another problem, let's solve that. One of my first introductions to business process architecture was a Six Sigma project that I worked on, which was to back out the number of Excel spreadsheets that had built on top of each other that had now become part of the process, right? And that is a description of what your architecture is. You really have to look at all of it. What are your processes? What are the silos? Who's doing what? And do not take for granted that Excel and all those other minimal tools actually do become part of the architecture because they're solving problems. But I just wanted to jump in and say that.
I think your point around we're calling it business process architecture. It could be a taxonomy. It could be a visual process map of how everything works. So I think the example is really important around a series of Excel files that show the end-to-end of what happens is the same as any business process architecture.
I think the other point for me is that all of these things are scalable. It doesn't matter how many resources you have or how much time you have. all of these ideas, and this tool, the process mapping is, you know, such an easy way to show and tell. Show plus tell equals sell is what we say. It's, as much as you know, there's nothing like seeing it and showing people the visual of what's actually being done. And so, you know, making everything visual is the whole point of architecture. You know, and if you think about architecture design, going back to my house example, you can have your dream house in your mind, but until you actually see the blueprint and you see how the rooms are all organized and how the flow is going to work, that's what makes it real for you. So using the visual tools is just so fundamentally important. And it also allows you to get ideas for immediate improvements, because that's where you see all the connectedness and the redundancies and the opportunities.
On this project, I mean, on the next slide, on this project, there was never one version of truth. Nobody understood it. Yeah. So, you know, the taxonomies, the processes, the tiering, the escalations, they all allowed us to, you know, hook it into the contract pod, the races, allowed us to kind of say to people, this is how it works. If you go to the next slide, Catherine, this is the rich picture that I was talking about. So we asked all these people, what is going on with contracting in this organization? And here's what the rich picture was. So the feedback that we got was there's lots of rework going on. Customer satisfaction in the US is great, but not in the UK. Your team is a bottleneck. It's disabling the delivery of commercial value. Different standards for depending on who goes on. We've got lots of authorization. So everything on the left-hand side was what we got from our stakeholder feedback stuff, and everything on the right-hand side is what we had to, or we wanted to go and build for the future, and that's what we ended up doing. So the next slide is the team that we got to, and then, you know, sorry, this is what kind of came back as kind of the things that we need to work on. Confusing demand. Clients don't get any information. As soon as it goes into legal, it gets lost. We're a black hole, a demand on the data. We don't have any data throughput, what type of work's coming in, who's doing it, complexity. So, and then we build a whole technology solution to do that. Here's the team that's kind of been established just recently in Porto. And the next slide is kind of my closing slide. So the two images at the bottom is our contracting process, right? And if you look at the line for the finance business partner swim lane, on the left-hand side was their current state, all the things that they need to do. On the right-hand side is what they're left to do, because we were able to define the current state map and then improve it so that they weren't doing the work that they were expecting not to do going forward. I think we might have had a question, Catherine, come through. Was there a question?
There is a question. A question about the division of labor, like how big was the team and what roles?
So the team that I had working with me, there was 3 of us. So we had a commercial lawyer, we had a process guy, and then there was me doing the overall program management. And we kind of affected 150 people. So the conversations, the feedbacks, all that kind of stuff. And you know, just to kind of close it completely off, we've never had one best way of contracting. We now have one. We know which contracts the teams in Porto need to do, and their taxonomies exist. We've got playbooks on current position, future positions. All of this stuff is essentially helping this organization move forward. But the message for everyone is that that problem that existed, i.e. the finance business partners doing legal work, you can't just go and take it off them and give it to a legal department. You've got to do the process architecture piece, identify the project plan, identify what the stakeholders want, and make sure that it kind of delivers the results.
Yeah, and with that, we are actually at the hour. This was essentially, it really was a jam-packed session, just extremely informative. And I do want to thank everyone who was able to join us and participate. And thank you so much, Catherine and Mo. And I just wanted to confirm that we can deliver the slides and share those with the team. And if anyone has any questions or follow-up, as Catherine has mentioned in our previous sessions, just please share that information. Either get it to me or just to ACC in general, who will route it to me, and I will route that over to Catherine and Mo, and we'll get back to you. But thanks everyone for just such an informative session, and we look forward to our next. So, and just before, Lorraine, do we have anything else that we need to cover? I just want to make sure we don't just sign off and I missed something.
No, so there's nothing upcoming, no announcements that we need to state for ACC. I just want to say our next session is September 13th, and that's on process improvement and project management. So look forward to seeing everyone there.
All right.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thanks, everyone. All right.